Everything rises and falls on leadership. I can recall my pastor, John Brooks at Macedonia Baptist, impressing that upon our leaders at a retreat over 10 years ago. He would say, all that we are rises and falls with our leaders. It was seedbed for questions that were on the tips of our tongue, soon to become reality. I was an engineer then, still trying to make sense of why designing structures mattered, and I was much taller then. Fast forward 10 years later, and our church has been on this journey of not simply expressing the value of leadership, but asking a pointed question of the church: who's not a leader? See, the prevailing thought is that some with privilege and power, they're leaders, and then others are not leaders. But our journey has forced us to delve into the impact of every person's life on the world around them, asking in many ways, who's not a leader? So now I'm the discipleship pastor. My job is to walk with people as we learn to follow Jesus together. My church, however, has learned the spiritual discipline of avoiding me. I think that it's my commanding stature, actually. Or it may be that they think that I'm going to give them a 4 to 68 week study on Bonhoeffer's ethics. Whichever the case, they run from me like the plague, but they run in packs, so they actually help further our community group structure. And I call that job security. So the church has been making great strides for over 100 years. We crossed paths and made to Flourish, and the learning community really became catalyst for a lot of thoughts coming together in the whole. Always done a great job of teaching the scriptures and the doctrine, but that broader implications of those doctrines and that moment-by-moment life of the gospel, every church needs work. See, we want to be a church where people realize their value to God and their value to each other. We're a loving church where we want people to realize that they have capacity and compassion and influence to fulfill calling right where they are. We have to think more broadly about the question, what does it really mean to love your neighbor? And it forced us to look into the role of every person in the church and their role in life, asking, who are the ones on the front lines of service to all mankind? Who are the leaders? See, when we value people like God values people, and when we allow their capacity and their compassion to be active in the context they're in, they flourish. And many times the things that they touch and the people they touch flourish also. We had to make a decision whether ministry was a Sunday thing and whether benediction means the end, or really both of those combined are gateway to blessing. And we chose both. We chose Sunday and Monday as a blessing, and it led us to 3 conclusions of what happens when every person is a leader. First, when everyone is a leader, we realize that all have the potential for flourishing, and not just those who work within the building called the church. Our learning community experience helped us to see our perspective was that we serve a really big God with a real small scope of concern. The earth is the Lord's, but not so much on Monday. He's the God that we all sang of as children, who's got the whole world in his hands. But apparently his hands were too small to deal with our neighborhoods, and certainly not our job tasks. But the learning community experience helps us to take the major chords of Sunday to fermata into Monday, drowning out all those workday blues. Well, most of them. We realized we had a wealth of knowledge by which we could influence others, and it led us to create what's so dear to us called the Linwood Fellows. Linwood Fellows is a place where we help people to connect their faith with their head, hands, and feet. Asking the tough questions and trusting Jesus and understanding that he's serious when he says, I am with you always, even into the grocery store, even into your workday task. We believe that every person is a leader and that God's church is not limited by the church walls. Second, we come to understand when every person is a leader, our occupations are essential to human flourishing, and they're not just a means to get by. So I slide books on the floor to get some of our members to trip over as they run from me. It's been extremely helpful for our business leaders and owners. Through our discussions with them, we've come to learn that when you take good people and you give them good jobs, they do good work. When good business owners' bottom line is not just the profit line. We've all come to understand that we're all image bearers, and our thumbprints of influence extends to those that we hire as well as the customers that we serve. And you know what? They become entrepreneurs of human flourishing. as much as the HR services and the physician wellness centers and the pharmaceutical services and the financial services that they've created. And then they began to look at it and think, how do we help others as well? They're looking upstream. How do we help others as well? And they began to ask questions like, what happens when you take good entrepreneurs, you give them good business practice with a really good gospel? It's helped them to see very clearly that they have influence and they can affect those around them. And what is evolved into is what will soon become a 10-month program where we'll take our aspiring entrepreneurs and some of our young businesses and combine their ideas with the gospel. They'll delve into concepts of faith, work, and economics with the kingdom. They'll investigate business practice in light of Christ, who gave the first job and manages all of creation well. They'll dream seeking the kingdom first. And then our hope then is our business leaders, our entrepreneurs, our business owners will realize that their businesses, their ministry matters to God too. Lastly, when we take it seriously that every person is a leader, we come to understand that personal calling is invaluable, but it's not big enough. We had a call out to meet with our educators, and we expected 20 to 25 at the church and found that at that point we had over 60 people involved in some form of professional education. Teachers, administrators, crossing guards, bus drivers, board members, professors, presidents, all serving diligently, all making sacrifices of their time, their money, and many of them their dreams to help adults and children. They all have some desire to change the system, to change the administration, to change the day that the school year is over. They all have some ignoble sense of being involved because they want to better humanity, to change the world, to change the school district. They all have a calling. But when we ask them how their calling fits with the grand story of God, they couldn't fill in the blanks objectively. When we ask them, how does grading papers bestow dignity on every student? Their hands raised slowly. When we ask them, how do you rest? How do you spend your summer vacations with God, resting into the next work that He has for you? Silence. And when I asked them, what if God wants you to stay in that drudgerous position for a little longer, doing what God needs you to do there? That's when they started to run from me also. But we didn't give up on them because we believe God's call was bigger than their plans. This evolved into what we have called the Education Consortium, or EC. EC is a space for our educators to reevaluate calling, seeking to understand exactly what it is they've been called to do. It's the place where our educators are back in class asking the tough questions. What does God tell us about Himself through the Laplace transform and other complex mathematics? Or how incredibly complex is this God that we serve when He takes simple words and combines them to convey meaning in the sentence that I just articulated to you? Or why is it that the crossing guard gives us one of the greatest lessons in gatekeeping and hospitality? Our educators are tough ones because they already have this innate sense of calling, and they have purpose, and their purpose is good, but even they realize that God's purpose gives better light to their purpose, and that His story is better than any vision board they could create for themselves or for others. He is, after all, the great author and finisher. We love our leaders and our EC members and their leaders, and they know so. They know it to be true, but even they come to realize that their leadership goes further when God's plan is bigger than their lesson plans. So who's a leader? Who's not a leader? The better question we ask is who's not a leader? When we understand that every person is a leader, we see that every person has the potential for flourishing and not just those who work within the building called the church. When every person is a leader, we realize that our vocations are essential to flourishing and not just there to get us by. When every person is a leader, we all have personal calling, but it's just not big enough. God's people can be useful to flourishing wherever they are. When we come to recognize that clearly, we see that God's plan and that God's purpose and God's story makes us tall enough to live for Him. Thank you.